Welcome to the Principles Gallery, helping you to bridge the gap between your values and your behavior. Today's principle, responding versus reacting. Now, in order to fully understand this principle, make sure that you've already watched the Introduction to Principles video. And the principle that we talked about on that video was learning to live by what you know, not by what you feel, because this is a companion to that principle. You see, we react based on what we feel. We respond based on what we know. And a key ingredient to both of those is that when we react based on what we feel, it's often involuntary and automatic, based on some deep programming deep in the brain. I'll explain that later, but we respond on the basis of what we know is an intentional decision to act according to God's design. Now, what do I mean when I talk about that acting according to what we feel is based on programming deep in the brain? I want to explain to you what I call emotional macros. Now, in computer science, a macro is a single computer stroke that represents a sequence of computer instructions. So like let's say that if you're working in a Word program, and Word has some default settings of type size and font and color and page setup. But let's say every time you work on a particular project, you have to go in there and open up Word, and then you have to change the font size and the font type and the colors and all those kinds of things. And it takes time, 6 or 7 keystrokes to get it to where you can work on that project. What a macro does is it records that sequence of instructions and then assigns it to a single computer instruction, a keystroke like Control-G, that represents all those instructions. So now all you do is you hit Control-G, it automatically opens up Word, and then it changes all those settings, go through that sequence of instructions until it gets it ready automatically. Now, that's the same that's true with emotional macros. It is a single instruction or a single event that keys off a set of emotions and actions and reactions. Let me illustrate that. Let's take a little boy named Johnny. And Johnny's 10 years old, and he's written a paper at school that he's very proud of. He can't wait to get home and show it to his parents. He gets home and he finds his dad and he shows it to him, and his dad reads it and he says, "Now, Johnny, that's not your best work, is it?" Now, his dad didn't mean anything bad by that. It was just his honest reaction. But as Johnny walks away, he's devastated. He feels like he's disappointed his dad, let his dad down, and he goes to bed that night and he can't sleep. He feels like why bother? Like he can't please his dad, he can't please anyone. He feels stupid, and he cries himself to sleep. The next morning, his dad wakes him up early and says, "Come on, Johnny, it's Saturday, let's go fishing." Takes him fishing all day, they have a blast, and by the end of the day, Johnny has completely forgotten about that incident. Now let's fast forward years later. Johnny's in college, he's studying to be a writer, and he has a teacher that's his favorite teacher. He really likes her and values her opinion, so whenever he writes something new, he gives it to her so that she can critique it and give her opinion. So he's given her a paper, and he goes by her office one afternoon to check on it. And he says, "Did you get a chance to read the paper I gave you?" And she said, "Well, yeah, I did." And he said, "Well, what did you think?" And she said, "Well, Johnny, that's not your best work, is it?" And he thanks her and doesn't think anything about it. He walks away. But by the time he gets to his car, he's just feeling kind of uneasy, just not quite right, and he doesn't know why. That night in his dorm room, his roommate's saying, "What is wrong with you? What are you so irritable about?" And he says, "Nothing, I don't know." And that night as he lays in bed, he has trouble falling asleep. He has self-doubts about whether he should be a writer or not. And finally he falls asleep, and the next morning wakes up fine and forgets that ever happened. That's an emotional macro. Now, you know what my favorite emotional macro is? See if you can relate to this one. What do you feel when you smell fresh baked cookies coming out of the oven? Isn't it a warm, fuzzy, secure feeling? See, that probably got programmed in you way back when you were a child, when mom was making cookies on a cold day and you smelled those and you had just this sense of security and warmth and love from your mother. And we associate that smell with that. That's an emotional macro. Now we have thousands of these emotional macros. And the only remedy to the emotional macros, so that sometimes it's a word or a look or just something that happens, the way the weather is, that can key off all this set of emotions that's automatic, that's involuntary, and we react on the basis of what we feel. These emotional macros. The remedy for that is responding versus reacting. You see, because when we respond according to our understanding of God's design, that's going to replace that. We're going to short circuit that macro, and we're going to behave according to what we know, because we're going to respond with an intentional decision that's going to short circuit the automatic reaction. Now, this takes practice, but I'm telling you, if you practice this and you learn these two principles, learning to live by what you know, not by what you feel, and therefore responding versus reaction, it's going to set you free in everything that happens in your life. So the principle is respond versus react. And you react according to what you feel, but you respond according to what you know. I'm Sam Lewis for Living That Matters, the Principles Gallery.